What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Wilt Chamberlain is considered one of the greatest players in the history of the NBA. Up until about 20 years ago, in fact, he was considered one of the two or three greatest players the game has ever seen, if not the GOAT. At that time, the three greatest players were Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, and Wilt Chamberlain. But over time, over the last 20 years, and I would say it has a lot to do with shock jocks who value rings and ring counting and all of that. Wilt's stock has dropped dramatically to the point where not only is he fallen out of the top 5 in a lot of people's all-time lists, he's now even fallen out of the top 10 in some people's list. One of the biggest knocks on Wilt Chamberlain is that he was a loser. He only won 2 championships in his 14-year career compared to Bill Russell's 11 and 13. For instance, people feel that he should have won far more. Wilt was very, very frustrated by this analysis of him being a loser. I remember him appearing on Conan O'Brien's show about 2 years before he died. I think it was back in 1997. And I remember Wilt said something to the effect of, well, if I was a loser, then damn near everybody else in the NBA was a loser. Considering the fact that only one team won the championship every year. Which is a solid point because sometimes people act like it was only 2 teams in the league, Wilt's team and the Boston Celtics. But anyway, Wilt was once quoted talking about this stigma. And he said, quote, "God, how I empathized with the Bulls last night." Now he's talking about the Bulls in the 70s, not Michael Jordan's Bulls. He's talking about the Bulls team that had, I believe, Tom Burwinkle, Bob Butterby Love, his old teammate from Philly, Chet Walker, Jerry Sloan, Norman Van Leer. He's talking about that team. Okay. God, how I empathized with the Bulls last night. To play so well and come so short against such insuperable odds and still lose. For most of my career, of course, right up until the Lakers won an NBA championship in 1972, in fact, I've been called a loser too. For damn near half my life, I've lived with that loser label stuck on me like some big ugly scar from an operation I'd never had. But I was no more a loser all those years than Chicago was a loser that night in Los Angeles. Loser? Shit. If I'd been a loser, so were such so-called basketball immortals as Bob Pettit and Dolph Schayes. To say nothing of such sports heroes as Hank Aaron and Willie Mays and Joe Namath and Jim Brown. No one ever called those guys losers. But do you know how many world championships each one of them won? I'll tell you exactly how many. 1. And that's the same number I'd won before the Lakers won their 72 championship. Funny, isn't it? Most people forget my first world championship back in 1967 when I was with the Philadelphia 76ers. Even with just one championship going into the 71-72 season, I'd won more than Elgin Baylor or Oscar Robertson or Jerry West or Jerry Lucas or John Brody or Roman Gabriel, who recently passed away this year, or Sonny Jurgensen or Bob Feller or Ted Williams or Juan Marichal had ever won. Not only that, but people always seem to forget that back when I was a kid, I led my YMCA team to the national championship. They forget that in 3 years, my high school team lost only 3 games and won 2 all-city and 3 all-public school championships. So that frustrated Wilt that he was judged based upon the fact that he could not overwhelm, Bill Russell's Boston Celtics. But to be fair, many of those years when the Boston Celtics won the championship, they were beating the Lakers without Wilt Chamberlain. And you can argue that had Jerry West and Elgin Baylor in 1962 had Wilt Chamberlain, I think you could argue, make a very strong argument, that had Wilt Chamberlain been on that team, they won the championship. I mean, it went 7 games with that team anyway. They beat the Lakers constantly. Matter of fact, Jerry West was only 1-8 in his career in the NBA Finals. And I believe Elgin Baylor was 0-8 in the NBA Finals. But nobody seems to hold it against him. Nobody ever calls him loser. They hold that distinction for Wilt. And then people say, well, because Wilt was so big. He was. He was big. He was skilled. He was strong. He was all these things. And that's the only reason why those games, for the most part, were even competitive. But as I said before, it wasn't the Bill Russell-Wilt Chamberlain matchup that decided those series. It was the backcourt. And there are 140-something contests against one another. Bill Russell averaged 23 points and 14 rebounds. Chamberlain, in those 140-something contests where they played against one another, averaged about 30 and 30. So how exactly was Bill Russell shutting Wilt Chamberlain down? And, as I said before, if you look at the Boston Celtics backcourt, they had Bob Cousy, the best point guard of his era, Bill Sharman, the best shooter of his era, Sam Jones, the most clutch perimeter player and probably the most clutch player of his era outside of Jerry West, and the third best shooting guard in the NBA behind Jerry West and Hal Greer. John Havlicek, arguably the greatest sixth man in NBA history, and then one of the great players of all time, the all-time leading Celtic scorer. I mean, and he had Casey Jones, a shutdown defensive guard. So, I mean, what was Wilt supposed to do? In his prime, their backcourt was what? Tom Gola? No, not Tom Gola. Guy Rogers and an older Paul Arizin. So, it is what it is. Anyway, tell me what you guys think.